There are crimes that shock us to our core, that make us question the very nature of evil itself. The story of Keith Hunter Jesperson is one such case, a nightmare that unfolded across American highways in the early 1990s, leaving at least 8 confirmed victims and countless shattered lives in its wake. This is not just a story about a killer. This is about the women whose lives were stolen, the families left searching for answers, and a justice system that almost failed them completely. Before we dive deeper into this disturbing case, I want to connect with you. Where are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments below, and if you're finding this content valuable, please hit that like button. It helps us bring more important true crime stories to light, stories that need to be told, stories that honor the victims and remind us why justice matters. Keith Hunter Jesperson was born on April 6, 1955, in Chilliwack, British Columbia, Canada. He was the middle child in a family of 5 children, raised by Leslie Samuel and Gladys Lorraine Jesperson. But this was no ordinary childhood. From the very beginning, darkness seemed to follow this boy, who would grow into one of America's most notorious serial killers. His father was a domineering alcoholic who subjected his children to horrific physical abuse. We're talking about beatings with belts, electric shocks, and a reign of terror that shaped the household. Family members have corroborated these accounts, painting a picture of a home where fear was a constant companion. Young Keith was a large, awkward child. His siblings nicknamed him Igor or Ig, cruel monikers that isolated him further when the family relocated to Selah, Washington. He was shy, prone to playing alone, and when he misbehaved, the punishments were severe and traumatic. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn, where we see the early warning signs that everyone missed or ignored. At just 5 years old, Keith began torturing animals. He would capture birds and stray cats, beating and strangling them. He later claimed his father was proud of these acts, a chilling detail that speaks volumes about the environment he was raised in. By the time he was 10 years old, Jesperson had already attempted to kill. He tried to murder a boy named Martin after being repeatedly punished for Martin's actions. He also attempted to drown another boy who had dunked him underwater. These weren't childish pranks or accidents. These were calculated acts of violence from someone barely old enough to understand their full implications. At 14, he suffered an attempted rape, adding another layer of trauma to an already devastated psyche. Jesperson graduated high school in 1973, but college was never an option. His father doubted him, undermined him, left him with nowhere to go but down the path that had been laid before him. In 1975, at 20 years old, he married Rose Hookey. Together they had 3 children, including a daughter named Melissa, who would later become a crucial voice in understanding the impact of these crimes. But the marriage was doomed from the start. By 1990, Rose had moved to Spokane, Washington, suspecting Keith of infidelity. The divorce was finalized that same year. Jesperson worked as a long-haul truck driver, a profession that would become his hunting ground. He had once dreamed of joining the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, but a physical injury ended that possibility. Instead, he took to the open road, and those highways became corridors of death. Between January 1990 and March 1995, Keith Hunter Jesperson killed at least 8 women across California, Florida, Nebraska, Oregon, Washington, and Wyoming. His victims were vulnerable women, prostitutes, hitchhikers, people living on the margins of society who trusted him enough to accept a ride. He strangled them with his bare hands, a brutal and personal method of killing that requires looking your victim in the eyes as the life drains from them. His first confirmed victim was 23-year-old Taunja Bennett, strangled on January 21, 1990, near Portland, Oregon. They had argued at a bar. That argument cost Taunja her life. On August 30th, 1992, near Blythe, California, he killed an unidentified woman he called Claudia. He raped her before strangling her, adding sexual violence to his repertoire of horrors. In September 1992, in Turlock, California, he murdered Cynthia Lynn Rose, a prostitute who climbed into his truck expecting to earn money to survive another day. She never made it home. In November 1992, in Salem, Oregon, he killed Lorianne Pentland, another sex worker who made the fatal mistake of demanding double payment and threatening to call the police. Her attempt to stand up for herself cost her everything. June 1993 brought another victim in Santa Nella, California, a woman he called Carla, or Cindy, later identified in 2022 as Patricia Skipple. In September 1994, in Crestview, Florida, he killed a Jane Doe he referred to as Suzanne. This victim remained unidentified until October 3, 2023, when she was finally given her name back, Suzanne L. Kjellenberg. Her identification came after Jesperson confessed details to investigators from Okaloosa County, proving that even decades later, these cases remained active, that these women still mattered. On January 27, 1995, in Cheyenne, Wyoming, he strangled 21-year-old Angela Subrise. His final victim was Julie Winningham, killed near Washougal, Washington, in March 1995. This murder would be his undoing, the one that would finally bring him to justice. But here's where the story becomes even more disturbing, where we see the true narcissism and cruelty of this killer. After Tanya Bennett's body was discovered, an innocent couple, Laverne Pavlinak and John Sosnovsky, falsely confessed to her murder. In February 1991, they were convicted. He received life in prison. She received at least 10 years. Two innocent people locked away while the real killer roamed free, hunting more victims. Jesperson was furious, not because innocent people were suffering, but because he wasn't getting credit for his crimes. He wanted the attention. He wanted the notoriety, so he started writing. He scrawled a confession with a smiley face drawing in a truck stop bathroom. He sent taunting letters to media outlets and authorities, each one signed with those grotesque happy faces. He was mocking the system, mocking the victims, mocking everyone. Phil Stanford, a journalist for the Oregonian newspaper, coined the nickname that would follow Jesperson forever, the Happy Face Killer. One letter to the newspaper ran 6 pages long, detailing his crimes and ridiculing the police for their incompetence. He claimed to have killed up to 160 people, though he later recanted most of these claims. Authorities confirmed only 8 victims, but those 8 are 8 too many. 8 women with families, with friends, with dreams and futures that were violently stolen from them. Days before his arrest, Jesperson wrote a confession letter to his brother, detailing 8 murders. This letter would reopen investigations across multiple states and finally bring some measure of justice. He had attempted suicide twice as he felt the walls closing in around him. On March 30th, 1995, he turned himself in to authorities in Portland. Once in custody, he began confessing in detail, providing information only the killer could know, information that would eventually free Pavlinak and Sosnovsky. On January 7th, 1996, nearly 6 years after their wrongful conviction, Laverne Pavlinak and John Sosnovsky were released from prison. Jesperson had revealed exclusive details about Tanya Bennett's murder, including the location of her purse, proving beyond doubt that he was the real killer. But those 6 years can never be returned. That injustice can never be fully erased. Jesperson was convicted of multiple murders in Oregon and received 3 consecutive life sentences. In September 2009, he was indicted in Riverside County, California, for an additional murder. He was extradited in December and in January 2010 received a 4th life sentence. Today, at 70 years old, Keith Hunter Jesperson remains incarcerated at Oregon State Penitentiary in Salem. He stands approximately 6 feet 8 inches tall and weighed around 253 pounds at the time of his arrest. He is eligible for parole only in 2063, when he would be 108 years old. The story doesn't end with his imprisonment, though. The ripples of his violence continue to spread, touching lives in ways that are both heartbreaking and profound. Welcome back to the second part of our investigation into the Happy Face Killer. If you're just joining us now, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and please take a moment to hit that like button. These stories matter, and your engagement helps ensure they reach the people who need to hear them, whether that's students of criminal justice, survivors seeking to understand their own trauma, or simply citizens who want to understand the darkness that sometimes walks among us. Among all the victims of Keith Hunter Jesperson's reign of terror, there's one group we haven't discussed yet, one that carries a unique and devastating burden: his own family. His daughter, Melissa G. Moore, who was born Melissa Jesperson, witnessed her father's cruelty firsthand as a child. She watched as he killed and hung stray kittens, laughing while they scratched and struggled for life. Imagine being a child and seeing that. Imagine the confusion, the fear, the slow realization that the person who is supposed to protect you is actually a monster. Melissa found the courage to tell her story. In 2009, she published a memoir titled Shattered Silence: The Untold Story of a Serial Killer's Daughter. In this powerful book, she detailed the family trauma, the years of living with a killer and not knowing it, the moment when everything shattered, and she learned the truth about who her father really was. Her bravery in coming forward cannot be overstated. She gave a voice to the hidden victims of violent crime, the families left behind, the children who carry the weight of their parents' sins. Melissa has appeared on numerous programs to share her experience and help others understand the ripple effects of violence. In 2008, she appeared on Dr. Phil. In 2018, she was featured in an episode of Evil Lives Here, titled Put on a Happy Face, a grimly ironic reference to the nickname that haunts her family. She has also appeared on The Oprah Winfrey Show, ABC's 2020, and Monster in My Family, a program dedicated to the families of criminals. Beyond television appearances, Melissa became a correspondent for Crime Watch Daily, bringing her unique perspective to crime journalism. In 2014, she wrote for the BBC, reaching an international audience with her message of survival and healing. In 2021, she co-hosted a podcast called Life After Happy Face with Laura Petler, exploring what it means to rebuild your life after discovering your father is a serial killer. In 2018, Melissa contributed to the podcast Happy Face, produced by How Stuff Works, a 12-episode series that examined her father's crimes in detail. This podcast later inspired a television series on Paramount+, also titled Happy Face, which premiered on March 20th, 2025, with actor Dennis Quaid portraying Keith Hunter Jesperson. The fifth season of the program, Crime Plus Investigation, set to premiere on December 15th, 2025, will also focus on his crimes, ensuring that new generations understand what happened and why it must never happen again. The crimes have also been the subject of extensive literary analysis. In 2002, author Jack Olson published The Creation of a Serial Killer, examining the psychological and environmental factors that created Keith Hunter Jesperson. This book remains one of the most comprehensive analyses of his life and crimes, attempting to answer the question that haunts everyone who studies these cases: how does someone become capable of such evil? In 2021, audio tapes were released that revealed Laverne Pavlinak's efforts to incriminate John Sosnovsky in Tanya Bennett's murder. These recordings highlighted critical failures in the initial investigation. They showed how eager investigators can be led astray, how false confessions can derail justice, how the system that's supposed to protect us can sometimes become an instrument of injustice. But they also showed something else: the importance of persistent investigation, of never giving up on the truth, even when years have passed. The recent identifications of victims show that work continues. Patricia Skipple was identified in 2022, more than 2 decades after her murder. Suzanne L. Kellenberg wasn't identified until October 3rd, 2023. These women finally got their names back. Their families finally got answers. Justice delayed is justice denied. But it's also true that justice, whenever it arrives, matters. It matters to the families. It matters to the communities these women came from. It matters to all of us who believe that every life has value. Let's talk about what makes this case particularly disturbing beyond the murders themselves. Keith Hunter Jesperson targeted society's most vulnerable people: prostitutes, hitchhikers, homeless women. These were people who were already marginalized, already struggling, already invisible to much of society. He knew that their disappearances would be less likely to trigger major investigations. He knew that sex workers are less likely to be reported missing quickly. He exploited not just these women's immediate vulnerability, but society's indifference to them. This is a pattern we see repeated across serial killer cases. The victims are often chosen specifically because they're easy to victimize, because the killer believes they won't be missed, because society has already failed them in countless ways. It's a damning indictment of our collective priorities, of who we decide matters and who we decide doesn't. Every single one of Jesperson's victims mattered. Tanja Bennett mattered. Cynthia Lynn Rose mattered. Laurie Ann Pentland mattered. Patricia Skipple mattered. Suzanne L. Kellenberg mattered. Angela Subrise mattered. Julie Winningham mattered. The woman known only as Claudia mattered. They all had stories, had pasts, had people who loved them. They all deserved to live. They all deserved justice. And the fact that it took decades to even identify some of them speaks to systemic failures that extend far beyond one killer's actions. We need to do better. Law enforcement needs better resources for investigating crimes against marginalized populations. Society needs to stop treating certain lives as less valuable than others. These women needed help, needed opportunities, needed support. Instead, they encountered Keith Hunter Jesperson. The psychology of Jesperson is complex, but not excusatory. Yes, he suffered abuse as a child. Yes, his father was violent and alcoholic. Yes, he experienced trauma, including sexual assault. But millions of people endure similar or worse childhoods without becoming murderers. Abuse does not create killers. It creates trauma. What someone does with that trauma, how they choose to process it, how they choose to move forward, that's where individual responsibility comes into play. Jesperson made choices. He chose to torture animals as a child. He chose to attempt murder at 10 years old. He chose to strangle 8 women. He chose to mock the authorities with his happy face letters. He chose to claim credit for murders to feed his ego. These were not inevitable outcomes of his childhood. These were decisions made by someone who valued his own desires over human life, who saw other people as objects to be used and discarded. His manipulation of the media and law enforcement shows calculated intelligence. He knew how to play the system, how to taunt investigators, how to make himself the center of attention. The happy face signature was branding, pure and simple. He wanted fame, wanted notoriety, wanted to be remembered. In that at least he succeeded, though not in the way he might have hoped. He's remembered not as some criminal mastermind, but as a pathetic man who killed vulnerable women and bragged about it. The wrongful conviction of Laverne Pavlinak and John Sosnovsky deserves special attention. This wasn't just a tragic mistake. It was a catastrophic failure of the justice system that cost 2 innocent people years of their lives and allowed a serial killer to continue murdering. Pavlinak initiated the false confession, apparently involving Sosnovsky to give her story credibility. Why would someone confess to a crime they didn't commit? Psychology research shows multiple reasons: mental illness, desire for attention, coercion by investigators, or in some cases, a disturbed need to be part of a significant event. Whatever her motivations, the system should have caught the lies. Investigators should have questioned inconsistencies. The prosecution should have demanded better evidence. The defense should have fought harder. Instead, 2 innocent people were convicted, while the real killer was free to murder at least 6 more women. Those 6 deaths could have been prevented. Cynthia Lynn Rose, Lori Ann Pentland, Patricia Skipple, Suzanne L. Kellenberg, Angela Subrise, and Julie Winningham might still be alive today if the system had worked correctly in 1991. This is not about placing blame on individual investigators or prosecutors. It's about recognizing systemic problems that persist today. False confessions happen, wrongful convictions happen, and while they're happening, real perpetrators remain free to cause more harm. We need better interrogation practices, better verification of confessions, better protection for defendants, and a justice system that values truth over closure, that values accuracy over speed. Keith Hunter Jesperson remains in prison, where he will almost certainly die. He continues to claim additional victims, but authorities verify only the 8 confirmed cases. He occasionally gives interviews, still seeking attention, still trying to make himself important. But the real importance lies elsewhere. It lies in remembering the victims. It lies in learning from the mistakes of the investigation. It lies in understanding how we can prevent similar tragedies in the future. The story of the Happy Face Killer is not just about one man's evil. It's about vulnerable populations that need protection. It's about a justice system that must constantly improve. It's about families like Melissa Moore's who must rebuild their lives after unimaginable revelations. It's about investigators who must never give up, even decades later, on identifying victims and bringing closure to families. It's about all of us and our responsibility to create a society where people like Keith Hunter Jesperson find it harder to hunt, where vulnerable women have better options than hitchhiking or sex work, where the system works to protect everyone equally. The happy faces he drew on his letters were meant to mock, to provoke, to disturb. But perhaps we can reclaim that symbol. Perhaps we can make it represent something else. The resilience of survivors like Melissa Moore, the dedication of investigators who never gave up, the justice finally served for Tanya, Cynthia, Lori, Patricia, Suzanne, Angela, Julie, and Claudia. Perhaps those happy faces can remind us not of evil, but of the happiness these women deserved, the lives they should have lived, the justice they finally received. This research is based on reliable and updated sources through December 2025, revealing not only Jesperson's brutality, but also the lasting impact on victims, families, and the justice system. Cases like the recent identifications from 2022 and 2023 show that investigations remain active, that justice is still being pursued, that these women are not forgotten. And that, ultimately, is what matters most. They are not forgotten. They will never be forgotten. Their stories have been told, and in the telling they live on.